My wife blocked me everywhere after I mentioned kids, exposing a cold manipulation game that forced me to take back control of my marriage and future. And then one conversation changes everything. I'm talking about the kind of conversation that makes your wife block you on every platform known to mankind, change passwords to accounts you've shared since day one, and treat you like a stranger in your own house, all because I brought up having kids. Let me paint you the picture. We were sitting at dinner last Thursday. Nothing special, just our usual routine. She was scrolling through her phone while picking at her salad, and I was watching this commercial about life insurance for families. Something clicked in my head. We've been married for 3 years. We're both stable, good jobs, nice house. Time to take the next step, right? So I said it, simple as that. Hey, I've been thinking we should start trying for a baby soon. What do you think? The silence that followed could have cut glass. She looked up from her phone like I just confessed to murder. Her face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Flat, confusion, shock, anger, and something I couldn't quite read. Then she put her phone down very slowly and said, "Excuse me." I thought maybe she didn't hear me clearly, so I repeated myself. I said, "Maybe we should start thinking about having kids. We've talked about it before and I think we're ready." That's when she exploded. Not screaming, not yelling. Worse, that cold, controlled anger that makes your blood freeze. She told me I was being presumptuous, that I couldn't just decide these things unilaterally, and that she wasn't ready to be trapped by a baby right now. Trapped. That word hit me like a freight train. I tried to stay calm, asked her what she meant by trapped, and when she thought she might be ready. Basic questions, right? Wrong. Every question I asked made her angrier. She accused me of pressuring her, of not respecting her autonomy, of treating her like a baby factory. The conversation ended with her storming upstairs and slamming the bedroom door. I figured she needed space to cool down. We'd talk about it tomorrow when emotions weren't running so high. I was wrong. I woke up the next morning to find myself locked out of everything. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, blocked on all of them. I tried to log into our shared Netflix account, password changed. Our joint Spotify playlist that we'd been building for 2 years, access denied. Even our shared Google Photos, where we kept all our memories, were completely cut off. At first, I thought it was some kind of technical glitch. I mean, who blocks their husband over a conversation about kids? So, I tried calling her at work, straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking if everything was okay with our accounts. The message showed as delivered, but never opened. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a technical issue. This was psychological warfare. When she came home that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. Completely normal, except for the fact that I was apparently invisible. She cooked dinner for one, watched TV without acknowledging my presence, and went to bed early. When I tried to bring up what had happened, she looked at me with this blank expression and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Gaslighting at its finest. For the next few days, I lived in this bizarre alternate reality. In public, around friends and family, she was the perfect wife, laughing at my jokes, holding my hand, playing her role to perfection. But the moment we were alone, I ceased to exist. No eye contact, no conversation, no interaction whatsoever. The blocking strategy was military-grade precise. She'd unblock me just long enough to see if I'd sent any messages, then block me again immediately. It was like psychological torture designed to make me question my own sanity. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the blocked messages, timestamps of when I'd been cut off from accounts, recording our interactions or lack thereof. Call it paranoia, but something in my gut told me this was bigger than just a disagreement about timing. By the end of the first week, I realized what she was doing. This wasn't about kids or timing or being ready. This was about control. She wanted me to crack, to apologize for even bringing up the subject, to promise I'd never mention it again. She wanted me to crawl back and accept that our future would be exactly what she decided it would be, with no input from me. But here's the thing about being married to someone for 3 years. You learn their patterns. And this level of manipulation doesn't just appear overnight, which made me wonder, what else had she been controlling that I'd been too blind to see? The second week of this silent treatment circus, I decided to stop playing defense and start playing detective. If my wife thought she could manipulate me with blocking games and psychological warfare, she clearly underestimated who she was dealing with. I started with the basics. Our shared laptop had been off limits since the blocking began, but she'd forgotten about one crucial detail. We shared an iCloud family account. Every photo, every backup, every deleted message was still syncing to my phone. Technology works both ways, sweetheart. What I found made my blood boil and my stomach drop at the same time. Text threads with her sister dating back months. Not recent conversations about our fight, but ongoing discussions about how to handle the baby situation when I eventually brought it up. She'd been preparing for this conversation long before I ever opened my mouth. One message from 3 months ago stood out. He's going to want kids soon. I can feel it coming. How do I shut that down without looking like the bad guy? Her sister's response was even more enlightening. Just tell him you're not ready yet. Keep pushing it off. Most guys give up after a while if you make it difficult enough. 3 months. She'd been strategizing how to manipulate me for 3 months, but it got worse. Way worse. I found a group chat with 3 of her closest friends titled Operation Baby Block. I'm not making this up. They had an actual group chat dedicated to helping her avoid having children while keeping me in the dark about her real intentions. The messages were like reading a manual on deception, screenshots of articles about how to manage a husband who wants kids, tips on how to make the conversation so uncomfortable that I'd stop bringing it up, even suggestions on timeline manipulation, promising to try next year with no intention of following through. One friend had written, just keep telling him you want to travel more first, or that you want to focus on your career. Make him feel selfish for pushing. Works every time. Another gem, if he gets too persistent, make him think there might be fertility issues. It usually scares them into backing off. I had to put the phone down. I was shaking with anger, but more than that, I was devastated. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd planned my entire future around, had been playing a 3-year con game on me. I kept digging. I found emails to a fertility clinic, not for treatment, but asking about permanent birth control options. She'd been researching getting her tubes tied without telling me. The consultation was scheduled for next month. That's when everything clicked into place. The sudden anger when I brought up kids wasn't because she wasn't ready. It was because I disrupted her timeline. She was planning to make the decision permanent, then break the news to me as a done deal, probably would have framed as some medical emergency or necessity. I found draft text messages she'd never sent, probably thinking better of it. One read, I need you to understand that having kids would ruin everything we've built. Why can't you just be happy with what we have? Another unsent message was even more revealing. Maybe we're not as compatible as we thought. I never wanted the suburban family life, and I'm not going to pretend I do, just to make you happy. But the most damaging evidence was a voice message she'd sent to her best friend just 2 days after our dinner conversation. I could hear her laughing in the background as she said, you should have seen his face when I brought up being trapped. He looked like a kicked puppy. I give it 2 weeks before he drops the subject completely and apologizes for bringing it up. 2 weeks. She'd calculated exactly how long it would take to break me down. I spent the rest of that day processing what I discovered. This wasn't just about having different opinions on timing. This was systematic deception about fundamental life goals. She married me knowing I wanted a family, had actively participated in conversations about our future children, and had been planning the entire time to make sure it never happened. The worst part wasn't even the lies, it was the cold calculation behind everything. The group chats, the research, the timeline manipulation. It was all so methodical, so premeditated. I wasn't her husband in those messages. I was a problem to be managed. That evening, she came home with takeout and that same fake smile she'd been wearing all week. She sat down at the table, opened her food, and started eating like nothing had happened, still giving me the silent treatment, still pretending I didn't exist. But now I knew the truth, and truth changes everything. I sat down across from her and just watched her eat. After about 10 minutes of this, she finally looked up with irritation in her eyes. What? She asked. I smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind of smile you give someone when you know something they don't. You know, nothing. Just thinking about how interesting the next few weeks are going to be. She went back to her food, but I could see the uncertainty creeping in. The blocking strategy had been designed to make me desperate, to make me guess what was wrong, to put me in a position where I'd have to beg for information. But I didn't need to guess anymore. I had all the information I needed. Armed with the truth, I decided to let her play her game while I prepared mine. The beauty of knowing your opponent's strategy is that you can counter it perfectly. She wanted to escalate the psychological warfare. Fine. But this time, I wasn't going to be the one getting played. The next phase of her manipulation strategy kicked in exactly as I expected. She started involving other people. First, it was her mother, Suddenly, her mom was calling me with concern about how I was pressuring her daughter about having children. The conversation was clearly scripted. Her mom used phrases like a woman's right to choose and marriage is about compromise. Words that sounded nothing like the woman who'd been begging us for grandchildren since our wedding day. I played along perfectly. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Johnson. I would never want to pressure anyone into anything they're not ready for. That's not the kind of man I am. Her mom seemed confused by my calm response. The script probably told her I'd be defensive or argumentative. Instead, I was agreeable and understanding. I could practically hear her brain recalibrating. Next came the friends. Our mutual friends started reaching out one by one with the same rehearsed concern. Apparently, I was being too intense about the baby thing and needed to give her space to process. My favorite was when her college roommate called to lecture me about reproductive autonomy. I let her finish her entire speech, then said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. Everyone deserves to make their own choices about their future. Thanks for helping me see that so clearly." Another confused silence, another script derailed. But the real masterpiece was when she got my own brother involved. She'd somehow convinced him that I was going through some kind of midlife crisis and obsessing over having kids, to the point where it was affecting our marriage. When he called to give me the "maybe you should back off and focus on your relationship" speech, I almost laughed out loud. She'd managed to turn my own family against me based on a completely fabricated version of events. I told him exactly what I told everyone else. "You know what? You're right. I think I need to really examine what I want out of this marriage and make sure I'm being fair to both of us." By the third week, she was getting frustrated. None of her usual tactics were working. I wasn't begging for forgiveness. I wasn't asking what I'd done wrong, and I wasn't trying to negotiate or compromise. I was just agreeable. She started testing new approaches. One morning, she accidentally left her phone unlocked with a text conversation visible. The message thread was with some guy named Derek, and it was filled with laughing emojis and inside jokes. Classic jealousy bait. I glanced at it, made no comment, and went back to reading my news. She waited for a reaction that never came. Then she started the concerned wife act. Suddenly, she was worried about my behavior. I was being too quiet and distant. She'd catch me looking at my phone and ask who I was texting. When I said work stuff or my lawyer, she'd get this panicked look in her eyes. The lawyer part was true, by the way. I'd started consulting with a divorce attorney not because I'd made any decisions, but because I wanted to know what my options were. Knowledge is power, and I was done being the only person in this marriage operating without complete information. Her attempts to regain control became more desperate. She tried the anniversary card, suddenly wanting to plan a romantic getaway to reconnect. She tried the career card, talking about a promotion that would require us to postpone major life decisions. She even tried the health card, mysteriously developing stress-related symptoms that would make pregnancy complicated right now. Each manipulation was more transparent than the last. I responded to all of them with the same calm understanding. That sounds reasonable. We should definitely focus on what's best for both of us individually. The breaking point came when she tried to involve my mother. My mom called me, clearly uncomfortable, and said my wife had reached out to express concern about my behavior changes and wondered if I was dealing with some kind of mental health issue. That's when I knew she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That was beyond manipulation. That was character assassination. She was using mental health as a weapon, trying to make my own mother question my stability. I told my mom the truth, not the bitter, angry version, but the calm, factual version. I explained that we'd had a disagreement about having children, that my wife had responded by blocking me on all social media and involving multiple people in our private business, and that I was simply trying to figure out if we wanted the same things out of our marriage. My mom was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Son, that doesn't sound like the behavior of someone who wants to work things out." Exactly. That night, my wife came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant. She'd unblocked me on social media and was suddenly being affectionate again. The silent treatment was over, replaced by love bombing. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, snuggling up to me on the couch. "Maybe I overreacted. I think we should talk about our timeline more seriously." There it was. The manipulation playbook's final chapter: give him just enough hope to keep him hooked, then slowly move the goalposts until he forgets what he originally wanted. I looked at her, this woman who'd spent 3 weeks trying to break me down psychologically, and realized something had shifted. Not in her. She was still playing the same game, but in me. I was done being a player in someone else's game. It was time to start my own. The love bombing lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days of her being the perfect wife again, cooking my favorite meals, suggesting we watch movies together, even initiating physical intimacy for the first time in weeks. It would have been touching if I didn't know it was all calculated manipulation. On Saturday morning, while she was in the shower, I made my decision. No more games, no more strategies, no more psychological chess matches. Time for a direct confrontation with all cards on the table. I set up my laptop on the kitchen table and opened all the evidence I'd gathered. Screenshots of the group chats, the emails to the fertility clinic, the text threads with her family, everything. I wanted it all visible when she came downstairs. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, hair still damp, expecting to find me making breakfast like I had the past 2 mornings. Instead, she found me sitting calmly at the table with 3 years of lies displayed in front of me. Her face went through that same rapid-fire expression change I'd seen 3 weeks ago. But this time I caught every detail. Confusion, recognition, panic, and then something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. "We need to talk," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "And this time, we're going to have an honest conversation." She tried to play it off. "What's all this? Why are you going through my personal messages?" I had to give her credit for attempting the offense is the best defense strategy, but I wasn't buying it. "These aren't personal messages. These are strategic planning sessions about our marriage that I was deliberately excluded from. Sit down." The authority in my voice surprised both of us. She'd never heard me speak to her like that before, probably because I'd never had to. But then again, she'd never orchestrated a 3-month deception campaign against me before either. She sat down reluctantly, pulling her robe tighter around herself like armor. I started with the group chat. "Operation Baby Block. Explain that to me." She tried to laugh it off. "That's just girls being dramatic. We give everything ridiculous names." "No," I said, turning the laptop screen toward her. "This is a coordinated effort to manipulate me into giving up on having children while keeping me in the dark about your real intentions. Read your own words back to me." Her face was getting red now. That angry flush she got when she was cornered. "You had no right to go through my private conversations. That's a violation of trust." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Trust? You want to talk about trust?" I pulled up the fertility clinic emails. "Were you planning to tell me about this consultation, or were you just going to get your tubes tied and present it as a medical emergency later?" That's when the mask finally slipped completely. The fake confusion, the manufactured outrage, the victim act, all of it disappeared. What was left was cold, calculated anger. "Fine," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. I never wanted kids. Not with you, not with anyone, not ever. I thought you'd grow out of it like most men do when they realize how expensive and limiting children are." There it was. 3 years of marriage and she'd finally told me the truth. "So, when we talked about baby names during our engagement, that was what?" I asked. "Entertainment. That was me playing along to keep you happy, just like I've been playing along with this whole suburban dream fantasy you've built in your head." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not hurt, but clarity. And the blocking, the silent treatment involving our families, was that all part of keeping me happy too? She stood up abruptly, pacing. "Now, that was me trying to make you see reason without having to crush your delusions completely. I was trying to be kind." "Kind?" I almost laughed. "You tried to convince my own mother that I was having a mental health crisis. You involved my brother in a fictional version of our marriage problems. You orchestrated a campaign with your friends to manipulate me into giving up on fundamental life goals. That's your definition of kind? I was protecting us both from a conversation that would end our marriage." "No," I said, standing up to face her. "You were protecting yourself from the consequences of 3 years of lies. There's a difference." She tried a different approach, her voice getting softer, more vulnerable. "Look, maybe we can work something out. Maybe in a few years when we're more established." I held up my hand to stop her. "Don't. We're past the point of maybe and someday. You've made your position crystal clear, and so have I. We want completely different futures." That's when she pulled out the big guns. The tears started flowing and she reached for my hands. "Please don't do this. We can make this work. I love you. We can find a compromise." "What compromise?" I asked gently but firmly, removing my hands from hers. "You have kids, but resent them and me for the rest of our lives? I give up on having a family, but spend the next 20 years wondering what if. There's no middle ground here. The tears stopped as quickly as they'd started. So that's it? You're going to throw away 3 years of marriage over this? I'm not throwing anything away. You made this decision 3 months ago when you started plotting how to manipulate me instead of having an honest conversation. You made it again when you researched permanent birth control behind my back. And you made it a third time when you tried to turn my own family against me. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to find one more angle to work. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. You'll never find anyone better than me, you know that, right? You're not exactly a catch. Good luck finding someone who will put up with your boring routine and your need to control everything. And there it was. The real person I'd been married to for 3 years. Not the loving wife, not the victim of my unreasonable demands, but someone who thought so little of me that she believed I'd accept a lifetime of deception rather than risk being alone. I smiled, and it was genuine this time. You know what? You just made this decision a lot easier for me. I closed the laptop and headed toward the stairs. I'll be staying in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we figure out the logistics. Logistics of what? She called after me. I turned back to look at her one last time. Of you getting exactly what you've always wanted. A life without the burden of my expectations. Sunday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. No more guessing games. No more emotional manipulation. No more wondering if I was being unreasonable. The truth had a way of cutting through all the noise. I made coffee, sat down on my computer, and started making lists. Not emotional, desperate lists of pros and cons about our marriage. Practical, strategic lists about logistics, finances, and timeline. I'd learned something important from watching her operate. Emotion makes you vulnerable, but planning makes you powerful. First call was to my lawyer. Not the consultation call this time, but the let's move forward call. I explained the situation in clear, factual terms. No angry ranting about manipulation. No emotional outbursts about feeling betrayed. Just the facts. Fundamental incompatibility about major life goals, evidence of systematic deception, and irreconcilable differences. My lawyer was impressed with the documentation I'd gathered. Most people come in here with nothing but feelings and accusations. You've got a paper trail that tells the whole story. The prenup we'd signed would make things relatively straightforward. We'd kept most of our finances separate anyway, which I now realized wasn't romantic independence. It was her exit strategy. She'd been protecting her assets long before I'd ever mentioned having kids. Next, I called my bank and started separating our joint accounts. Not hiding money or playing games, just establishing clear financial boundaries. I transferred exactly half of our shared savings into a new individual account and documented everything. Then I started looking at living situations, not apartment hunting. I wasn't going anywhere. This was my house too, and I'd been contributing to the mortgage for 3 years. If anyone was moving out, it wouldn't be me. By the time she came downstairs around noon, I had a complete action plan laid out. She found me at the kitchen table with paperwork spread out like a business meeting. "What's all this?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but unable to hide the concern in her voice. "Divorce papers," I said, matter-of-factly. "I filed this morning. You should receive official service in the next few days, but I wanted to give you a heads up." She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You can't be serious over one argument." This wasn't one argument. This was 3 years of systematic deception about fundamental life goals. But if you want to call it one argument, fine. It was a pretty important one. She tried the emotional approach again. "Please don't do this. We can work it out. Marriage is about compromise." "You're right," I said, looking up at her. "Marriage is about compromise. It's about two people being honest about what they want and finding ways to build a life together. What we had wasn't marriage. It was you managing me while secretly planning a completely different future." That's when she shifted tactics again. "Fine. Maybe I wasn't completely honest about the timeline, but we can fix this. I'm willing to reconsider having kids." I had to admire her persistence even as it irritated me. "No, you're not. You're willing to say you're reconsidering to buy yourself time to come up with the next manipulation strategy. There's a difference. You don't know what I'm thinking." "Actually, I do." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of her most recent group chat message sent just that morning. "He's actually serious about this divorce thing. How do I convince him I've changed my mind about kids without actually committing to anything?" Her face went white. She'd forgotten about the shared iCloud account again. "The consultation with the fertility clinic is still scheduled for next month," I continued. "You haven't canceled it. Your browser history from last night shows you researching how to delay divorce proceedings. And according to your text with Derek, you've already got someone lined up to help you through this difficult time." She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew there was no point in more lies. So, here's what's going to happen, I said, gathering up the paperwork. You're going to review these documents with your own lawyer. We're going to divide everything fairly and professionally, and we're both going to move on with our lives, to find people who actually want the same things we do. And if I refuse? She asked. I smiled, and this time it wasn't cold or calculated. It was almost grateful. Then you'll discover that I've learned a lot about strategy from watching you operate these past few weeks. The difference is my strategy is all documented, all legal, and all aimed at getting us both what we actually want as quickly as possible. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her running through her options. Finally, she asked, "What happens to the house?" "I keep the house. You take the condo downtown that you inherited from your grandmother. We both know you prefer the city anyway." "How did you know?" "The same way I found out about everything else. You left a pretty clear digital trail of your real preferences and plans." She nodded slowly. And for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely defeated. Not manipulatively sad or strategically vulnerable, but actually beaten. "When do you want me out?" "End of the month gives you time to get organized and find movers. I'll stay in the guest room until then." She picked up one of the divorce papers and scanned it. "This all seems very thorough. I had a good teacher in strategic planning." That evening, she came to the guest room door and knocked. When I opened it, she was holding 2 glasses of wine. "Peace offering?" she asked. I looked at the wine, then at her. "We're past peace offerings, but I'll accept a civil conversation about logistics." We went back to the kitchen and sat across from each other one more time. But this time, the dynamic was completely different. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no games, just 2 people working out the practical details of ending a marriage. "For what it's worth," she said after we covered most of the important points, "I really did love you. I couldn't be the person you needed me to be." "I know," I said, "and I loved who I thought you were, but we both deserve to be with people who love who we actually are, not who we pretend to be." She nodded and raised her glass. "To being honest about what we want." I raised mine. "To having the courage to go get it." 3 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading a text from my brother. "How are you handling everything?" he asks. The same brother who'd called to lecture me about backing off and focusing on my relationship. I text back, "Better than I expected. Turns out knowing what you want makes life a lot simpler." The divorce was finalized last week. Clean, professional, no drama. She got the downtown condo. I kept the house. We split everything fairly, signed the papers, and went our separate ways. No tearful goodbyes, no last-minute reconciliation attempts. No regrets. My family apologized for getting involved without knowing the full story. Her manipulation campaign had been so effective that even my own mother questioned whether I was being reasonable. But the truth has a way of clarifying things. The best part, I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm not sitting around feeling sorry for myself or wondering what I could have done differently. I'm grateful. Grateful that I found out who she really was before we had kids. Grateful that I learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. Grateful that I had the backbone to stand up for what I wanted, instead of accepting a lifetime of manipulation. I joined a hiking group last month and met someone interesting. She's a teacher, wants 3 kids. And when I mentioned that on our second date, she smiled and said, "Good, me too. When do you think we should start trying?" We both laughed, but there was something refreshing about that level of honesty. No games, no hidden agendas, no strategic planning required. My ex-wife tried to reach out a few weeks ago. A casual text asking how I was doing, probably testing the waters to see if I was miserable without her. I responded with, "Doing great, thanks. Hope you're finding what makes you happy too." She never responded. I wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. We both got exactly what we wanted. She has her freedom from family expectations, and I have my freedom from someone who saw marriage as a management project. Derek, by the way, didn't last long. According to mutual friends, he was more interested in being a rebound than a relationship. She's apparently dating someone new now, someone who shares her child-free lifestyle. Good for her. The house feels different now, lighter. I've turned the spare bedroom into a home office, started a garden in the backyard, and I'm actually enjoying cooking for myself again. Simple pleasures that got lost somewhere in this psychological warfare. People ask if I'm lonely. The answer is no. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonely in my marriage, constantly wondering if I was being unreasonable, if my wants were too much, if I should just accept whatever version of our future she was willing to offer. Now I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. I know exactly what I want. I'm not apologizing for it, and I'm not settling for anything less. To any man listening to this who recognizes the manipulation tactics, the blocking games, the psychological warfare, trust your instincts. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. Don't waste years hoping they'll become someone they never intended to be. Marriage isn't about compromising your fundamental goals. It's about finding someone who shares them. It's about building something together, not managing each other into submission. I didn't just unblock myself from her social media. I unblocked myself from a future that would have made us both miserable. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to let them manipulate you into giving up what matters most. And you know what? I'm still going to have those 3 kids someday, just with someone who actually wants them too. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.